Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and today I'm analyzing the MaryBeth Lewis case. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. Subscribe and like this video if you want to learn more about mental health and psychological indicators of true crime cases like this one. My analysis is based on speculations, not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. The question that cuts to the heart of this case is what drives a person to deception, forgery, and alleged attempted kidnapping, all in the pursuit of more children? What kind of psychological void requires this level of sustained, intricate manipulation? The most compelling psychological angle in this MaryBeth Lewis case is the deeply ingrained compulsion to have and control a newborn child, which appears to escalate into destructive obsession. MaryBeth Lewis, already a mother to 13 children, pursued an elaborate scheme to gain custody of 2 more infants, who were carried by a surrogate and had no biological connection to her. This is not simply a desire for a large family. It is a pattern of behavior suggesting an addiction to the role of a new mother and a dependent, uncomplicated relationship with an infant. She was 65 when she began the process for the last set of twins, having given birth to her 13th child at the age of 62. Most people reach a point of empty nest and redirect their energy. For MaryBeth, the urge was powerful enough to ignore significant risk and ethical boundaries. This intense drive points to a psychological need for supply of a newborn baby, a need so urgent that it seemingly overrides all other considerations, including the well-being of the infants and her existing family. It's a form of emotional dependency where the newborn represents a source of unconditional, uncritical love and constant attention. The backstory here is crucial. MaryBeth's desire for children began normally. She married her husband Bob Lewis, a pilot, and they had 5 daughters. In her late 40s, however, her path to motherhood changed, becoming more deliberate and eventually deceptive. She began using in vitro fertilization, or IVF, eventually giving birth to twin girls. She continued this relentless pursuit of conception, giving birth to her 13th child at the age of 62. This escalating pattern, from natural births to IVF, and finally to elaborate surrogacy fraud, shows a growing psychological reliance on new parenthood as the primary source of identity and self-worth. A compelling detail that underscores his obsession is the allegation that she attempted to induce lactation and pump for the surrogate twins, even though they had no biological connection to her and she never had met them. This specific action reveals a psychological attachment to the physical act of nurturing an infant, suggesting a profound need to experience every aspect of that bond, even through artificial means. This gives us a clue into the true nature of her obsession, a psychological need for the complete dependency of a baby. How did she manage to keep this obsession going and attempt to carry out the fraudulent surrogacy? The next critical mental health indicator is her demonstrated capacity for interpersonal manipulation and profound deception, which points toward a significant lack of empathy for those around her. This psychological angle is the cornerstone of the criminal allegations against her, which include forgery in the 2nd degree, criminal impersonation in the 1st degree, perjury in the 2nd degree, attempted kidnapping in the 2nd degree. The sheer volume of fraud charges, 30 counts in a sealed indictment, suggests a calculated, sustained effort to deceive legal and medical professionals. This level of manipulation requires a psychological detachment from the consequences it will have on others. She needed to maintain the facade of a normal, doting mother while simultaneously operating an entire scheme of deceit. The backstory interwoven here provides the first aha moment of her psychological state in the betrayal of trust. MaryBeth kept the pregnancy of the last set of twins, which was achieved through a donor embryo and a surrogate, a secret from her husband for months. When it came time for a court hearing to obtain a parentage order, she is alleged to have impersonated her husband during a Zoom hearing, as he was still unaware of the surrogacy agreement. This is an extraordinary psychological leap. It moves from simple secrecy to an active fraudulent impersonation that undermines the marriage and the legal system. The motive here is not monetary gain or malice, but a single-minded focus on her ultimate goal, obtaining the babies. The lie became more important than her relationship, her reputation, or her freedom. Her husband later described her as the boss and himself as a conflict averse. This suggests a coercive and controlling psychological dynamic in the marriage, where she was accustomed to pushing her will forward until others gave in, enabling her escalating obsession. The fact that she proceeded with the surrogacy and IVF without her husband's knowledge suggests she knew he would object, and her psychological response was to simply bypass his autonomy through elaborate deceit. To truly understand the why behind this destructive need for new children, we must explore the potential root causes, which often lie in the issues of early abandonment or unmet emotional needs. While there is no public diagnosis, the patterns of behavior are consistent with someone attempting to fill a deep psychological void. What does this kind of obsessive behavior at an advanced age say about her psychological development? Could her drive be linked to an early life experience where her own sense of being wanted was compromised? While specific early trauma is not publicly confirmed, the intense need for a dependent, uncritical relationship, like that with a newborn, often stems from a lack of secure attachment in formative years. MaryBeth's decision to have a constant supply of new children, even when the older ones were growing up, suggests she was psychologically unprepared for the natural end of the infant dependency stage. The older children become individuals with their own needs and autonomy, which can threaten the psychological framework of a parent whose identity is entirely dependent on having a completely dependent child. In a sense, the new baby served as a psychological reset button, ensuring she never had to face the emotional reality of her children needing her less. This is where her obsession comes full circle, leading to an OMG moment about the impact on her older children. The New York Times reported that her older children were often heavily relied upon to care for the younger ones, to the point where one of her daughters struggled in college due to her child care responsibilities. This reveals a profound psychological imbalance. The pursuit of her own emotional need for a new baby led to the exploitation and emotional neglect of her existing children. It was less about nurturing 13 children and more about ensuring the availability of a newborn, a constant source of that specific dependent relationship. This psychological behavior is a red flag. She appeared to view her family not as individuals, but as an audience or support staff for her ongoing central obsession. The final betrayal of trust in this case is the fact that she failed to tell her existing children that the younger siblings were conceived via donors, a fact that is fundamental to their identity. This is one more act of dishonesty, suggesting her psychological focus solely on her desires, with little regard for the complex emotional lives and long-term needs of her own flesh and blood. The final element of this psychological analysis centers on the aftermath of the indictment and her apparent psychological refusal to accept the reality of her actions. Despite the 30-count indictment, MaryBeth Lewis pleaded not guilty to all charges. She declined plea offers and insisted that she was a big-hearted mom being unfairly kept from her children. This suggests an almost absolute level of self-deception, which is a key psychological defense mechanism. What is the psychology behind denying overwhelming evidence, especially when it concerns something as emotionally charged as the well-being of a child? Cognitive dissonance is the psychological stress experienced by a person who simultaneously holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. For MaryBeth, the two contradictory beliefs are, I'm a good, loving mother, And I committed criminal fraud and deception to acquire a baby. To resolve this conflict and protect her core identity, her psychological framework chose total denial. By casting herself as the victim, the devoted mother whose children are being stolen, she maintains her self-image as the moral, caring person, thus justifying legal actions as necessary steps towards a righteous goal. She is fighting for the custody of the infants, even though she has never met them, and they are thriving with their foster parents. Her legal fight, even after the indictment, is not a rational legal move. It is a continuation of her psychological obsession. The foster parents who wish to adopt the infants have established a true emotional bond. MaryBeth's continued pursuit, despite the lack of biological or pre-parental connection, is an act of psychological selfishness. She is prioritizing her obsessive need over the stable emotional security of those two infants, a pattern that unfortunately tracks back to the exploitation of her older children. This case is a profound study in how a singular psychological obsession, the desire for a dependent newborn, can become a driving destructive force in a person's life, leading to the unraveling of relationships and an alleged descent into serious criminal behavior. The motive here is not external, like money or power. It is entirely internal, a psychological compulsion to perpetually reset her life to the most primal, validating role she knows, the mother of a dependent infant. This is a powerful psychological angle, highlighting the complexity of human behavior when a core need becomes a relentless obsession. What did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? Let me know. If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.